Hey guys, Thomas Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the series The Devil's Plan. If you end up enjoying this full series review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out small YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. And fourth, my Discord server, you can join, collab, and chill and do all that cool stuff for free. And chilling will be reminded at the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let's get into The Devil's Plan. So, you can sort of think of this show sort of like the Squid Game, but without the death. A competitive series of events where the games are a little bit more, I wouldn't say less childish by an extreme degree, but by an extent. It does require a little bit more thinking, I would suppose, here. As well as the only way to increase the money pot here, and instead of eliminating players like, say, something in the Squid Games, you have to compete together to raise the price, which I think is a way more interesting way to go about the whole raising of money situation rather than just eliminating people. I think that the way this show is formatted also takes advantage of not having a particular point of view in a different way from, say, the Squid Games. And I know that there's going to be an unfair amount of comparisons to the Squid Games, at least initially, but I just want to say, like, that's initially what I thought of when I watched this particular show. So this will be the last, I think, time I will try to make that direct comparison anyway. So in the Squid Game, we do follow a particular protagonist, and in that sense, we're always sort of following and rooting for him more so than anyone else. Now, while there might be other sympathetic characters, sure, but we ultimately know that our lead character is going to be the one that's victorious. There is an outcome that is sort of ingrained in knowing who the main character is in a show like the Squid Game. Here, the show is presented as a bunch of people just enter in this house in a not so particular order as to suggest that just because the first person who enters in, that's not automatically going to be our POV character, our point of view character. And that seems to follow suit as all of our contestants arrive as well. There doesn't seem to be one that stands out as this person will be sort of the one we follow. Instead, each game presents itself, and again, there's just these alliances that sort of form from pretty simplistic things, whether that be if the contestants were set as roommates, or if they were born in the same year, smaller things of that nature, rather than seeing these heavier archetypes that may have been established in Squid Game. So, with that, it does come across as more of a mystery as to who may potentially win the Devil's Plan, and that does seem to shine through each example as each game progresses, and the more competitive ones, that being so yeah, I found this to be a way more interesting show in this regard. The two finalists in this particular instance ended up just happening to be two characters that one of the two was very much inclined to help others when they found themselves struggling within a particular game or something of that nature. He ended up being one of the finalists. The other didn't form any particularly strong alliances per se. He was sort of almost like a lone wolf type in that sort of circumstance, I suppose. If there were set alliances, they weren't that particularly strong bound. Someone very more keen to say, well, the devil's plan. Though, again, that can only come from knowing that he ends up winning at the end. And again, there's no clear insight that he's going to end up being the winner. It just happens to more, again, be the case of you're just watching as more and more people are being eliminated, so your potentiality for who is going to end up winning just decreases over time, so that way your pool of being correct is way more likely as time goes by. So yeah, the games in question, there was sort of, one of the earlier ones was sort of this Among Us type game, and I know people are tired of hearing Among Us at this point, but it is sort of like that, or Mafia is a previous extension of that, I suppose, before even Among Us became popularized, with the special roles and the deceivers, who are, their objective is to quote unquote kill players or just have them, wait, essentially. And again, you have those alliances starting to form from that game moving forward. The team-up games, and again, this is where things get interesting, are again the only times where cooperation is mandatory. And not only mandatory, but only get harder and harder, as well as force, again, these players to work together instead of apart. So again, I do find that aspect way more interesting as to how to raise the pot in any particular game, is that you're sort of forcing these players to work together in that way to increase the money that you are allotted to win in each instance of these particular games. And these can range from these sort of puzzle-related games, whether it's like placing puzzle pieces to like form something, making sure every piece fits, or if it's a memorization game that if you're wrong at any point, then you're automatically eliminated, to one where it's like these three competing against one. This happens significant later when there's a lot less players, obviously. And by the way, they end up losing that one. They end up like playing against this like professional player at this game, so they end up losing it due to a simple mistake. And yeah, with that, it's really clear that just a simple misstep can be detrimental to a particular game. And it does seem like as the main games were progressing, the more competitive games were sort of moving along. It seemed like as they were progressing forward, more and more of them were gonna dwindle down the alliances regardless of intent. Like Among Us, or the Among Us type game, it makes sense that the alliance could be so massively big. I mean, you're essentially allotting to find all the crewmates, essentially, so that would almost inherently be your sort of go-to alliances, to try to find as many of them and, figure them out as soon as possible. That's sort of almost inherent to the game. Whereas later games, you will see that it's more so based on luck, or there's like this sort of simplistic Monopoly game that's like the one after this one, and they still sort of maintain those same alliances that they just crossed from the Among Us type game to this one, and you see how advantageous it still is to have that large sort of group, and we see the smaller alliance suffer significantly due to this later down in that same game, where it's this sort of, again, Monopoly-sized game. And then as games progress, again, we get more games that are more individualized, like this one where you're like gridding out these squares and you have to fill out your own territory, so it's individualized in that sense. But if you're not attacking, you could still consider yourself, I guess, a part of an alliance to an extent. So, like, you're not playing as aggressively, so perhaps that can be where, that alliance can still hold some weight. But you're still playing in a lot more independently than previously. And one of the last games, which an alliance just simply can't work, is a game like poker. Every person is now betting individual chips, individual bets, individual, decisions. So that is like one of the very last games. It's very much designed to be like, well, you had your alliances, but that's that. Now you gotta compete against literally everyone else against the table. So yeah, most of the players were eliminated during this competition from, I think it was like 9 to 3 that were eliminated from that competition alone. I think that was the numbered slide, if I remember it correctly. So yeah, it definitely pushed players in from bigger alliances to, again, individualize more and more as the games progressed. And again, I think that that's a much more suiting way of handling that too. Though I suppose the whole thing about building alliances earlier and then, say, like in Squid Game, doing something like the marble game is very also a twist in the knife, as it were. To suddenly and abruptly do that is also a very impactful way of doing it as well. So yeah, there are differing metrics of how to sort of go from, very alliance-based games like an Among Us type game where you can easily work together versus a lot more independent games like this sort of poker game that they play towards the end there. And again, they did earn a sufficient amount of money during their competitive or teamwork-based matches, so there is a prize pool for the winner that is sufficient and nice. And that is essentially the Devil's Plan. And yeah, I think this is a much smoother way of going about doing something like this. I just saw the American Squid Game, the challenge one, and there's now all this report stuff that's happening about like how the conditions were really poor apparently. Like I watched the entire season, I suppose, and of course you don't learn. You either learn about that stuff as it's happening or learn about it after the fact. I happened to learn about it after watching the entire thing. And that's like, I try to separate from the show itself and conditions that are actually happening in the stuff, to maintain as being as objective as possible, obviously. But it does suck to learn that those things are happening. That doesn't change that fact, I suppose. So yeah, obviously, if we were to get, say, like an American version of the Devil's Plan, for example, I would hope that they would learn to avoid doing whatever happened in the Squid Game, the challenge, avoid doing that at all cost, making sure that people are at least comfortable, which it did seem like the Devil's Plan in terms of like how it arranged itself was very much, unless you were someone who was sent to the prison, unless it's that, I think that's the only thing I would probably remove in the Devil's Plan. You know, but that is sort of an aspect that did change a portion of the game, I suppose. So I don't know how I would go about doing that exactly, how to transition that over and make it so that the players are still comfortable if you were to again transition this to an American version of the the Devil's Plan. But I think it would be a lot smoother than, say, a Squid Game probably would be to do. Just because what's provided seems to be, and the living space provided seems to be a lot more better suited to living comfortably and making sure the people that are participating are going to be set to be in good working condition to even do this. So with that, I think I'm going to give The Devil's Plan an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10. I think it's a really interesting show or series. I look forward to if there's going to be a season 2, or again, if they Americanize it, I actually wouldn't mind seeing that either, I suppose. And keeping it in the same mentality of we don't get a particular point of view, and kind of keeping that mystery and different competitors and all that juicy stuff, and maybe different games or similar type of games, and then seeing how just different people react to them. Any number of things could have happened or could happen, I don't know, but it'd be interesting to watch again, or something similar of that nature. Anyways, that's my review of The Devil's Plan, and if you end up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. Want to head over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. So get to to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me, my channel directly, and to my Discord server, you can join, collab, and chill, and do all that cool stuff. And until next time, everybody, bye-bye.